I never thought a simple meal could turn into a nightmare. One bite, and everything changed. My throat burned, my chest tightened, and a sickening realization hit me: I was poisoned. Lying in a hospital bed, weak and confused, the doctor's words echoed in my mind. You were poisoned. But the real shock came later, when I found out who was behind it. My name is Monica, and for the past 5 years, I have been married to David. Our life together seemed perfect, at least. That's what I believed. David was everything I had ever wanted in a husband: kind, responsible, and deeply devoted to his family. From the very beginning, his sister Lisa was always present in our relationship. She was overly protective of David, always acting as if she had a say in every decision we made. At first, I tried to understand her behavior, assuming it was just sibling attachment, but over time, it became clear that her presence wasn't just about being a concerned sister. She wanted control. Lisa never accepted me. During our early dating days, she would make passive-aggressive comments about my background, my job, and even the way I dressed. She always compared me to David's ex-girlfriend, saying how she was like family, and how David was happier with her. David assured me that he loved me and not his past. But Lisa's constant interference never stopped. At family gatherings, she found subtle ways to embarrass me, always making sure her words were just disguised enough to avoid confrontation. If I cooked something, she would make a sarcastic remark about how David preferred his meals differently. If I planned an outing, she would suddenly arrange something else and convince David to go with her instead. When David proposed to me, I expected some resistance from her, but nothing prepared me for how far she would go. Instead of congratulating us, Lisa left the room without a word. Later, she called David in tears, accusing him of abandoning her and not considering her feelings. She claimed she should have been the first to know, and that our engagement felt like a betrayal. Despite all this, David stood by me, reassuring me that his sister would eventually come around. But she never did. Our wedding became another battleground. Lisa insisted on being involved in every decision, criticizing everything from the dress I chose to the guest list. When she didn't get her way, she resorted to emotional manipulation, making David feel guilty for not prioritizing her opinions. On the wedding day, she arrived wearing an all-black dress, a clear statement of her disapproval. She spent the entire evening sulking, whispering to relatives about how I had taken her brother away. Even after we were married, Lisa found ways to interfere. She would drop by unannounced, make comments about how our home lacked a woman's touch, and even suggested that David deserved someone more suitable. Over time, I learned to ignore her, but her presence always felt like a dark cloud over our marriage. Then, things took an unexpected turn when I became pregnant. David and I were overjoyed, ready to embrace this new chapter in our lives. When we announced the news, our families were thrilled except for Lisa. She barely reacted, offering a forced smile before quietly leaving the room. I knew she didn't like me, but I never imagined she would try to harm me. That realization only came later when it was nearly too late. The tension between Lisa and me had always been there, but I never thought it would escalate to something dangerous. After announcing my pregnancy, I sensed a shift in her behavior. That made me uneasy. At first, it was subtle. She suddenly started acting kinder, asking about my health, and offering to help with preparations. She even bought baby clothes, claiming she was excited to be an aunt. David saw this as progress, but something about her sudden change felt off to me then. The comments began. You know, pregnancy changes a woman. Some men start looking elsewhere when their wives don't keep themselves up. I brushed it off as another one of her cruel remarks, but the seed of doubt had been planted. One evening, while David was in the shower, Lisa called. Her voice was calm, almost too casual. I just wanted to check on you, she said. I know how stressful pregnancy can be. I didn't trust her, but I remained polite. Then she added, by the way, have you noticed how distant David has been lately? My grip on the phone tightened. What do you mean? I don't want to worry you, she sighed. It's just, he's been spending a lot of time out and he talks a lot about his colleague, Rachel, she's been supportive of him at work. You know? My heart pounded. David had mentioned Rachel before, woman he worked with, but I never thought much of it. I just think you should be careful, Lisa continued. Men have needs, and if they don't get attention at home. I hung up before she could finish. That night, I couldn't sleep. I wanted to trust David, but Lisa's words haunted me. Over the next few days, I began to notice things I hadn't before. David working late more often, texting on his phone with a faint smile, and coming home, smelling like a perfume that wasn't mine. When I finally confronted him, he looked genuinely confused. Monica, what are you talking about? I've been busy with work. With Rachel, I blurted. He frowned. Rachel, she's just a colleague. I wanted to believe him, but doubt clouded my mind. Lisa had successfully planted a wedge between us, and I hated that it was working. Then came the final blow. One evening, I was at my in-laws' house for dinner. Lisa had prepared the meal, and, for once, insisted that I take the first bite. David and his parents were engaged in conversation, unaware of the silent tension between Lisa and me. As soon as the food touched my tongue, an intense burning spread through my throat. My vision blurred, my body weakened, and I realized something was horribly wrong. I barely managed to whisper, David, before everything went dark. He woke up to the sound of beeping monitors and the sterile scent of a hospital room. My body felt weak, my throat dry, and my head pounded. The dim lighting and the sight of an IV in my arm sent a wave of panic through me. David sat beside me, his face pale and filled with worry. The moment I stirred, his hand clutched mine tightly. Monica, thank God you're awake, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Confusion clouded my mind. My last memory was of dinner at my in-laws' house, Lisa smiling as she handed me a plate. Then, the burning sensation, the dizziness, and everything turning black. What happened? My voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. David hesitated, his jaw tightening before he finally spoke. The doctor said, "You were poisoned." Poisoned. The word sent chills down my spine. My chest tightened, and I struggled to process it. Someone had tried to harm me. No, someone had intended to harm me, but who? The answer hit me like a lightning bolt. Lisa. A deep fear settled in my stomach. Had she really gone that far? How? I croaked. David ran a hand through his hair, looking both angry and shaken. They're still running tests, but the doctor said it was something in your food. It could have been fatal if you had eaten more. I swallowed hard, nausea rolling through me. My baby. I clutched my stomach instinctively, panic flooding my veins. The baby. Is the baby okay? David's grip on my hand tightened, his eyes softening. Yes, the baby is fine. The doctors ran tests. They said you're lucky. If you had consumed a larger dose, it could have been much worse. Relief crashed over me, but it was short-lived. My mind raced with questions. Who did this? Did Lisa actually try to kill me? David's mother and father entered the room then, their faces filled with concern. His mother rushed to my side, tears brimming in her eyes. Oh, Monica, I was so scared. How are you feeling? I nodded weakly, unsure of how to respond. My mind was spinning too fast. Then, Lisa walked in. Her expression was carefully composed, but I could see the tension in her jaw, the flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. I'm so glad you're okay, she said softly. The words felt hollow, fake. A cold rage bubbled in my chest. I wanted to scream at her, demand to know what she had done. Why she had done it, but I couldn't. Not yet. David spoke before I could. The doctors said Monica was poisoned, he said, his voice tight. We need to find out how this happened. Lisa's expression remained neutral. That's terrible, she murmured, shaking her head. Who would do such a thing? Her performance was flawless. But I saw it the way her fingers twitched, the slight shift in her stance. She was nervous. David's parents looked equally horrified, whispering among themselves. His father promised they would investigate, saying they would check the kitchen, ask questions, and figure out how this had happened. I wanted to scream the answer at them. It was her, but how could I prove it? My heart pounded in my chest, fear creeping into every part of me. If Lisa was capable of this, of poisoning my food while I was pregnant, what else was she capable of? And most terrifying of all, what if she tried again? As I lay in the hospital bed, trying to process the fact that someone had poisoned me, David's father entered the room with a grim expression. His eyes darted between David and me before he finally spoke. "We checked the security cameras," he said, his voice low and serious. A chill ran down my spine. Cameras, of course. My in-laws had security cameras in the kitchen and dining area. If Lisa was behind this, the proof had to be there. David straightened, and his father hesitated, glancing at his wife before letting out a heavy sigh. The footage, it shows Lisa handing Monica her plate. Silence filled the room. I felt my stomach twist. I had known it, but hearing it confirmed sent a fresh wave of fear through me. Lisa had done this. David's own sister had tried to harm me and our baby. David's face hardened. "Are you saying Lisa poisoned Monica?" His mother gasped. "No, that can't be true." But deep down, I could see the doubt creeping into her eyes. His father sighed. "We can't say for sure. The footage doesn't show her doing anything to the food directly. But the way she insisted Monica take that plate, and how quickly she stepped back after giving it to her's suspicious." I clenched my fists. Under the blanket, she knew exactly what she was doing. Then, the hospital door swung open. Lisa walked in, holding a cup of coffee, looking as if she hadn't a care in the world. "Everyone looks so serious," she said, forcing a small smile. "Did something happen?" David turned to her, his expression unreadable. "Dad just checked the security footage." For the briefest second, I saw her stiffen. It was quick, barely noticeable, but I caught it. Lisa laughed lightly. "And what did it show?" "That you gave Monica her plate," David said, his voice dangerously calm. Lisa tilted her head, her expression carefully neutral. "Well, yeah, I was being polite," David's father cut in. "It also showed how fast you stepped away right after she took it, almost like you were waiting for something." Lisa's lips pressed into a thin line. "Are you seriously suggesting I had something to do with this?" She looked around the room, her eyes wide with faux innocence. "You think I poisoned Monica?" David's silence spoke louder than any accusation. Lisa scoffed, crossing her arms. "That's insane. I would never do something like that." I finally spoke, my voice hoarse but firm. "Then how do you explain it? The food I ate made me sick. You're the one who gave it to me." Lisa's gaze flickered for just a moment before she shook her head. "This is ridiculous." She turned to David's parents. "You believe me, don't you?" His mother hesitated, his father's jaw tightened. Lisa huffed. "Fine, if you all want to blame me, go ahead. But maybe you should ask Monica why she handed her plate to Jamie." My breath hitched. Jamie, Lisa's husband, had taken my plate after I refused to eat it. He was the one who ended up unconscious and rushed to the hospital before me. Lisa's eyes gleamed with something cold. "Did you ever think Monica might have done this herself?" A heavy silence fell over the room. David's face darkened. "That's enough." Lisa shrugged. "I'm just saying. We don't know what happened. Maybe Monica switched plates on purpose to frame me." My blood turned to ice. She was twisting everything. David's hands clenched into fists. "Get out, Lisa." Lisa blinked as if caught off guard. "David, I said get out," he repeated, his voice low, controlled, dangerous. For the first time, I saw real fear flicker across Lisa's face. She opened her mouth to argue, but then thought better of it. Without another word, she turned and walked out, her back stiff as soon as the door closed. I let out a shaky breath. David turned to his parents. "We need to involve the police." Lisa thought she could manipulate her way out of this. But this time, she had gone too far. And I wasn't going to let her get away with it. David wasted no time. The moment Lisa stormed out of the hospital room, he turned to his father. Call the police, he said, his voice firm and final. His mother gasped. David, are you sure? He looked at me, his jaw tightening. Monica and our baby could have died. Jamie is still in the hospital. There's no doubt in my mind Melissa did this. His father nodded without hesitation, pulling out his phone. A heavy silence filled the room as I tried to process what was happening. My heart pounded, not just from fear, but from the overwhelming reality of it all. Lisa wasn't just toxic, she was dangerous. She had tried to poison me, and now she was trying to frame me. But she wasn't going to get away with it. The police arrived within the hour. They spoke with the doctors, collected medical reports, and asked us all a series of questions. When they reviewed the security footage from David's parents' home, I saw the shift in their expressions. It wasn't concrete proof of her tampering with the food, but it was enough to make her their prime suspect. Then, the final piece of evidence surfaced. Jamie regained consciousness. David and I rushed to his hospital room, unsure of what to expect. He looked pale, exhausted, but his eyes were filled with something I hadn't seen in them before. Understanding. She did it, didn't she? His voice was hoarse. I swallowed hard. Jamie. He shook his head. I knew Lisa was manipulative, but this, I never thought she would go this far. David clenched his fists. Did she ever say anything to you about hurting Monica? Jamie hesitated for a long moment. Then, he exhaled sharply. A few weeks ago, she started acting strange, talking about how she was losing control over everything. She was obsessed with the fact that you two were having a baby. She kept saying, Monica didn't deserve the perfect life. My stomach twisted. Jamie continued, his voice heavy. That night, before dinner, I saw her in the kitchen. She was hovering over the food, acting weird. She didn't notice me watching. I should have asked her what she was doing. Maybe then, this wouldn't have happened. A cold chill ran through me. Jamie's hands tightened into fists. She tried to kill you, Monica, and now she's trying to twist everything. I won't let her. That was all the police needed. Jamie gave his statement, and within hours, Lisa was taken into custody. The confrontation happened 2 days later. Didn't expect to see her again, but the police allowed David and me to visit before she was officially charged. Sitting in the interrogation room, Lisa looked different. Her usual smug confidence was gone, replaced by exhaustion and something else. Anger. The moment she saw us, she let out a bitter laugh. So, what now? You came to gloat. David didn't even blink. Why did you do it? Lisa scoffed. Don't act so innocent. You never cared about me. The moment she came into your life, I became nothing to you. She shot me a glare full of hatred. I inhaled sharply, but didn't look away. That's not true. I never tried to take David away from you. Lisa leaned forward, her voice sharp. You stole everything. My family, my brother's love, the attention I used to get. And now, you're having a baby while she cut herself off, but the damage was done. David stiffened. You what? Lisa's eyes burned with fury, but for a brief moment, there was something else in them. Pain. I lost mine. The words hung heavy in the air, everything clicked. Her resentment, her obsession with our pregnancy, her desperation for control. Lisa had lost her own child. I swallowed hard. Lisa, don't, she snapped, her voice trembling. Don't pity me. That's not what this is about. David's expression remained cold. You tried to kill my wife. And my child. There's no excuse for that. Lisa's jaw tightened, her mask cracking. I didn't want to kill you. She looked at me, her voice lower. I just wanted you to suffer. I wanted you to feel even a fraction of what I felt. A lump formed in my throat. I wanted to feel sorry for her, but how could I? She had tried to destroy me. David exhaled, his voice firm. You need help, Lisa, but I won't be the one to give it to you. For the first time, real fear flashed across her face. David, please, but he was already walking away. I stood up, looking at her one last time. I hope you find peace, Lisa. but you won't find it by hurting others. And with that, I followed my husband out of the room, leaving Lisa behind. This time, for good. Lisa was formally charged, and the reality of her actions finally sank in. She had no escape this time, no manipulation, no lies to twist the truth. In her favor, the evidence was stacked against her, and even her own husband, Jamie, refused to stand by her. David's parents were devastated. His mother, despite everything, still struggled to accept that her daughter had done something so cruel. His father, however, was firmly needed to face the consequences of her choices. For weeks, our lives revolved around court hearings, statements, and reliving that terrifying night. Each time I sat through another testimony, I felt a strange mix of emotions: anger, sadness, but most of all, relief. Relief that she could no longer harm me. Relief that she could no longer poison my marriage. Relief that, finally, we could move forward. The day of the final verdict arrived. Lisa sat in the courtroom, her face pale, her hands clasped tightly together. I wondered if she truly regretted what she had done, or if she was only sorry she had been caught. The judge's voice echoed through the silent courtroom. Guilty on all charges. Lisa let out a strangled sob, but David didn't react. He had made his peace with this. The sentence was read: several years in prison for attempted harm, tampering with food, and endangering a life. Lisa's plea for leniency fell on deaf ears. Even the revelation of her past miscarriage did nothing to sway the judge's decision. As they led her away, she turned back one last time, her gaze locking onto mine. There was no hatred in her eyes anymore, only emptiness. For the first time, I saw her for what she really was, a broken person who had allowed her pain to consume her completely. I looked away. I had nothing left to say to her. In the months that followed, life slowly returned to normal. David and I focused on preparing for our baby's arrival. The fear that once gripped my heart was now replaced with something else. Hope. Jamie, now free from Lisa's toxic grasp, had started to rebuild his life. He visited us often, and though he still carried guilt over not realizing who Lisa truly was, he knew he had done the right thing by walking away. David's parents were still adjusting. His mother took longer to accept the truth, but eventually, she stopped blaming herself for Lisa's choices. It wasn't easy, but she knew she had to move forward, and me, I learned to let go. Lisa no longer had power over me. She no longer controlled my thoughts, my fears, or my life. One evening, as I sat on our porch, watching the sunset, David joined me, his hand resting on my stomach. "We made it through," he murmured. I nodded, leaning into him. We did. Our past was filled with betrayal and pain, but our future, it was ours to write. And I knew, no matter what, Lisa would never be a part of it again.